It is Tuesday, February 1st, 7 p.m. here in Washington, D.C., and I'd like to welcome you all to another edition of Nation's Pastime in the nation's capital, WCUA's only baseball-centric talk show. I'm your host, Andrew Snaith. As always, here with my wonderful co-hosts, James Higgins and Robbie Cruz, and we're going to be breaking down the latest in the baseball world, as we normally do, which unfortunately is not a whole lot, but we'll get into that. Firstly, thank you all so much for tuning in. We are live every 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on WCUA Radio on Tuesdays, and our shows are posted in podcast form on YouTube. Go ahead, follow us on Instagram at NatPastimeCap. That's at NatPastimeCap. You'll be able to find out when our shows are posted, and we also post some highlights there and some other fun stuff as well, so definitely give us a follow there at NatPastimeCap for all that fun stuff. And yeah, like I said, not a whole lot to talk about on the exciting world of baseball today. There was a meeting between the owners and the Players Association that took place. It lasted about an hour and a half, and it wasn't very good, to say the least, unfortunately. It's looking like there's going to be a real possibility of not only spring training being postponed, but potentially the season as well. And, of course, the biggest reason for that is we know after the 3 weeks that were given to players in the virus season of 2020, a lot of the pitchers said, hey, it's not enough time, it's 3 weeks. So it's safe to assume you're going to need at least 4 weeks to get these players ready. And assuming spring training is going to be delayed now, they're probably going to have to go into a situation where they push everything back. And we don't start on time, which is something I don't want to say, but is unfortunately becoming the reality. So let's talk a little bit about that meeting now. Firstly, Robbie, were you able to review some of the stuff from the meeting today? I'd like to know just your thoughts on your level of optimism right now about playing baseball on time in 2022.
Yeah. I did pay attention to the notes. I paid attention to what was said in the meeting. The end results of it I paid close attention to. And at the end of the day, last week I was, speaking about how great it was that the two sides are actually meeting. And I still think that's great. I think it's great that the two sides are meeting and that they're trying to work out a deal. They're trying to talk and figure something out. However, it seemed like everything that came out of today's meeting was it was horrible. I don't think they made any progress, and this is a sign that baseball is not going to start on time. I'm still standing by my original. Okay, I'm changing my original prediction.
Changing it.
Yes. Last week, I thought, okay, we might be able to get it done by Valentine's week.
Your original one was...
My original one was around March.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to resort back to that timeline.
So we're going back to, what, beginning March?
Beginning of March. Originally, it was beginning of March, then Valentine's week, and now I'm going back to beginning of March.
So let's say it's beginning of March. Let's just pick a random date, March 4th. That means It's probably at least a week for everyone to report, and that puts you around March 11th or 12th. And then they need at least 4 weeks from there. So you're thinking mid to end April season start?
Mid to end April. I think the beginning of May is also a realistic time. It's just going to be one of those times. Because they can't afford to miss too many games. Yeah. The owners are willing to miss at least the first month of the season. So they're not afraid to miss games. And I think that's going to be a big factor in these negotiations.
Yeah, it seems like in the long run they're willing to sacrifice some games and some money this year to get a better deal. James, do you have some of the specifics from that meeting? I mean, I know they're not great. I know we don't really want to talk about them a whole lot because they make us very sad, but why don't you go ahead and break some of that down for us?
Yes, so it was a 90-minute meeting today, and according to Evan Drellick, the meeting was heated. There were some owners and players on both sides who participated. There were two main areas which the Players Association really wanted to have an emphasis on today. The first one was service time manipulation, and then the second area was pre-arbitration bonus pool in it. The request was drop it from $105 million to $100 million. So, and Drellick also said TBD on when the next core economics meeting will be. So that means let's just sit and fight until we actually figure out how much we want to drop it by or how much we want to raise it by. But in terms of service time manipulation, guys, the biggest example of this is Chris Bryant. The Cubs leaving Chris Bryant down till a certain date. It was, I believe, April 15th, April 16th, April 17th, somewhere around there, where he would get an extra year of club service time. So Bryant became a free agent in 2021 at the end of this past season instead of becoming a free agent at the end of 2020. The Nationals did this with Strasburg. They waited till June to call him up, so he was a free agent initially after 16 instead of after 2015. The Blue Jays did this with Vladdy Jr., so he's a free agent after, 2026 instead of 2025. 5. Now, interestingly enough, though, in that same year, the Padres did not do it with Tatis, nor did the Mets do it with Pete Alonso. So in years past, it had been a big thing, but 2 of the 3 bigger prospects in 19 did not have their service time manipulated like Vlad Jr. did. So that is something that maybe is trending in the right direction and doesn't need to be as big of an area of emphasis, knowing that teams need a win. And the Padres got the long-term deal done with Tatis, so both sides could point to that and be like, look, we didn't manipulate his time, and we rewarded him for those services, which could be a positive step, which I don't know how many people are talking about. Another big thing that the Players Association modified with service time manipulation was awarding guys with a full year of service time. The union to quote Drellick's tweet, the union dropped the number of players who would be awarded a full year of service time. Previous proposal, which is listed below, which I will read off, was to give service time to players in top 30 or top 10 by WAR, depending on position. Now it's the top 20 or top 7 by WAR. And another thing is they would give a full year of service time to players who finished top 5 in the league for Rookie of the Year. So if that does go through, Wander Franco last year would have been given a full year of service despite not coming up till the end of June because he finished top 5 in Rookie of the Year voting. It's weird for different positions. I don't know. We don't need to get into all those specifics. Well, actually, we do. There's nothing else to talk about. So we have top 5 in the league for Rookie of the Year, top 3 for Reliever of the Year, and make first or second team All-MLB. Non-outfielders and non-pitchers who place top 10 at their positions in their respective leagues, according to an average of B-WAR and F-WAR, would also qualify. Okay, so a bunch of qualifications. The sides remain very far apart, and as Rosenthal reported last week with The Athletic, owners are willing to miss, and as Robbie said earlier tonight, our great insider here on NPNC, owners are willing.
Why?
Owners are willing to miss the first 30 games, which, look, they don't have to pay the players, which they might view as a win, but the gate revenue, the parking revenue, the beer revenue, the merchandise revenue, etc., that's all a big loss. It's a loss for the popularity of the sport, which is the most important thing, and hopefully they can get something worked out soon.
How bad is it that we might potentially have the second shortened season in 3 years?
Well,
that's bad.
It's bad. The first one, though, was not their fault. Like, they could have maybe done more than 60 games, but, like, you know, that was out of their control. They couldn't do a full
I know it's out of their
season.
control, but just how it looks on the sport, for a sport that is, quote, dying.
Yes, no, it looks terrible. And I'm not going to blame them for having a shortened season in 2020 because they were the first out of the 4 professional sports. They were the first sport to come back, so give them credit for that. And they got it done at the end of the day. 60 games was kind of what really time-wise all that the governments would allow them to do. But it's a very bad look, and it will put the game in as bad of a spot as it's been since 94. And Rob Manfred, there's no Cal Ripken Jr. Consecutive game streak to save the game. There's not. That saved the game in 95, and there's nothing like that this time that can save it.
There's also no 1998 home run race to save us either.
Yeah.
There is Shohei Ohtani, though.
I mean, that might be one of their saving graces, watching the 2 greatest players of this generation, really, it seems like, together.
Well, we've seen them for so long. Like, I don't know how many fans are going to be like, let's go watch them again if they've already seen it.
Maybe they'll both be healthy for once.
Yeah,
hopefully.
finally.
Hopefully. Yeah, no, very unfortunate. And there's not a whole lot else you can say. There's not a whole lot else that we can do as baseball fans other than just wait and wait for these talking heads on Twitter to let us know how the meetings are going. And it's just a sad spot right now because there's nothing to be excited about. This is normally the time of year when we're coming up on Valentine's Day. That means spring training. That means a lot of us can, get on a plane, escape this really bad northeast weather, go down to Florida and enjoy some baseball, some good weather. And that's just not going to happen this year. And I just think that's very unfortunate.
Okay, so I got the first question. Now I got to ask both of you guys.
Okay.
Do you stand by your original predictions with when an agreement was going to come? Now, Andrew, I think you said early, like a while ago, you were saying, oh, they're not going to miss spring training. Oh, the season's going to start on time. There's too much money on the line. Now we know that that's probably going to change. What are you thinking right now? And James, I want to know your thought too.
Well, let me clarify that for a second. That was more me trying to speak that into existence.
Oh my goodness.
I think I've known in my mind for a very long time, in my heart as well, that there was no chance they were going to get this done in time. There's just too many moving parts, and I just don't have faith in either side. I mean, of course, everyone's mad at the owners, but I don't have faith in either side to do that. I'm going to be honest. You asked me if my original prediction was correct. I don't.
Your original prediction was you thought they were going to come to an agreement like early February, I thought.
I think I said mid-Feb. I think I said around Valentine's Day like James did.
Okay.
Obviously, at this point,
no chance.
No.
There's no chance.
And if I think it was an article, I don't know who wrote it, but it was an ESPN. I know Jeff Passan tweeted it today that it was the different dates and when – I'm trying to think how to word this. It was the different dates that these scary possibilities become a reality of missing spring training, of missing opening day. And I believe what he said along the lines was if a deal doesn't miraculously get done in the next 7 days, there's no chance that spring training happens on time. I mean,
Okay,
it
so
already looks like that, but and then, like I said, once spring training's delayed, I mean, yeah, they could do a shortened spring training, but the players didn't like that, so the season's probably delayed as well. So, yeah, it's looking like unless there's a miracle in the next 7 days, of course my prediction's going to be wrong.
okay, so when
New
when
one?
would
You want a new one?
New prediction, and then James, I want your new prediction.
See, it's funny because if you would have asked me this a week ago, I would have stuck to that, or I would have said, end of February. But now today, here we are a week later, and that meeting just makes me feel awful. God, I'm gonna realistically say, in a perfect world, before March 10th. I think that would minimize the games missed. That would be maybe half, a little bit more of April games. I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna say before March 10th. I hope.
And I'm gonna say, I want to.
You're gonna say like August,
March 17th, that specific time.
The best St. Patrick's Day
on
gift
St.
ever.
Patrick's Day. Yeah.
It's tough to say right now. I'm not going to stick with my original Valentine's Day prediction. Some people want flowers, some people want teddy bears. All I want is baseball. That's not happening. Ultimately, I think it's not going to happen till March 10th at the earliest, because that would be the date where you would really start to have that March 31st opening. I mean, probably earlier, but that's where you'd really have the oh shoot moment of delaying the season. But if the owners are willing to miss 30 games and they're not going to budge, that's not going to bode well for the players. So I'll go with March 15th, but it could very easily move back.
See, that's the scariest thing for me, is the fact that they're willing to miss 30 and that they won't budge at all during these meetings. That means, why would they budge? They're just going to sit here until
they're
30
like
games
that.
are
That
missed.
is the fact that that's already out there. It's not like it's coming out, at the very end. It's like it's out there. Because, I mean, if they struck a deal today, nothing would be delayed. But, I mean, pitchers and catchers are supposed to report on Valentine's Day. And obviously, without a deal, guys can do stuff on their own, but they can't go to team facilities and work out. They can't see coaches. It's going to be a whole mess. So as much as guys want to get their work in on their own, there's going to be no coaching tips. There's going to be no advice, no treatment. You're going to have to do private treatment. It's a whole can of worms that they don't want to get into, but that they will get into.
Now, do you think that 30-day thing could potentially be a bargaining tactic? Maybe that's not
it very well could be.
Yeah.
I mean, but you think about a guy like Rosenthal, he's so plugged in. I mean, I don't think all 30 owners are going to sit there and be like, we're going to use this. Like, I'm sure some probably might want to use it as a bargaining tool, but I don't think every owner wants to use it as a bargaining tool. And, on the other side, the players obviously don't want to miss games, but how egregious, not how egregious, but how far off are their demands compared to what the owners want? There's got to be something in the middle that they can come to agree with. Obviously, these two sides don't like each other. They haven't for a while, and unfortunately, it's going to continue.
I will say, Robbie, James talked about this a little bit earlier, but the service time manipulation, obviously, it makes sense why teams did that. I think from a reasonable perspective, though, that's a fair ask to eliminate that, right? I mean, you want to think about entering the free agent market at age 26 versus 27. That's a huge deal. 29 versus 30, whatever it may be. That's a huge deal for these players.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, why the owners are trying to.
Oh, of course.
Because if they were to change the rules, then they would have to pay them sooner rather than later. And, there are so many potential things that could happen, like breakout seasons and all that, or, for all injuries, I mean, there's a lot of risks. So I understand, but I understand both sides of the coin. But for me, essentially, I really believe that I just feel really bad for the players, especially the guys like James said, Chris Bryant as an example.
Yeah.
They're getting screwed over. They're coming to free agency a year later, and that extra year, there are so many things that could happen. Injuries, like I said, you could just have a really poor season. I mean, so many factors could happen.
Well, not only that, remember, there's some cases, like I said, 26 versus 27, that's a big deal. You might think about a guy like Bryce Harper, who they accelerated him through high school so that he could hit the market at the absolute youngest age possible. I'm going to be honest, Bryce Harper probably doesn't get $330 million if he's 27 versus if he's 26. So these years matter, and I think it makes a lot of sense why the players are fighting for this.
I think for someone like Bryce, he probably still gets it because of his generational talent.
You get what I'm saying.
But the majority of guys, yes, that 1 year could very well hurt them. But I think in general, it's more just about the practice. It's not even about like, oh, this guy, was there at 28 instead of 27 or whatever it may be. It's more about the practice of why do you not want to win in the present. Depending on the situation. Now, if it's a team, like obviously the Padres and Mets showed they wanted to win then, and they called Alonso, and and Tatis up. Now, if it's someone like the Blue Jays in 19, they weren't going to compete in 19, so you could make that argument that they didn't want to win, but let's be real. That Vladdy missing the first 20 games in 19 didn't hurt the Blue Jays in 19. They weren't going anywhere then.
Well, also think about it like this. Like, when a guy comes into free agency at age, let's say 30 versus 29, they're probably getting a year less on their contract, right? Which is going to change how much they make at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it, but it's also the way teams can offset this, because this isn't just an owner's thing. This is a GM thing. This is a management thing. This is not something that, it's pinned on the owners right now, but this is not just an ownership-based thing. This is an organizational philosophy of what you decide to do with the players. They can easily say, well, we don't want to stunt his development, or we want him to develop more, and how can they say no, right?
Yeah.
Because, you can look at numbers and say, well, he did X, Y, and Z, and they say, okay, he hit 300 last year, but his OBP was low. We want to see him get a higher on-base percentage.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be. Even if all his numbers are great except for the strikeouts, cut down on the strikeouts. They're always going to point to one thing. Or maybe he had an injury the year before, and they said, we want to make sure he's fully healthy, right? So it's not like you can't point, as much as we think on the outside it's going to be easy to say you manipulated his time, you manipulated his time, whatever. They can easily just say, well, he was hurt last year. We want to make sure his hamstring's all right. Or we want him to cut down on the strikeouts. We want him to get on base more. Whatever it might be. We want to see him hit for more power. And they can just buy whatever it is, 2 weeks, 2 months, a month, however long it is, they'll buy as much time as they need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So really, not a big secret why that's one of the biggest things being discussed right now. I mean, hey, James, I think he did mention this, but we had some bargaining done today. The asking price went from $105 million to $100 million.
And that was for the pre-arb.
Yeah, pre-arb.
And last week you had the pre-arbitration time, I think, dropped from 6 years to 5 years. Before the service, not pre-arbitration, the service time. Service time was dropped to 6 to 5 years. That was in the players' proposition. That was the proposition.
I didn't even hear about that.
And
okay.
the minimum salary was upped from the players' proposition from $550K to $750K, and the union and Major League Baseball countered with $675K. So at least there's progress there. Obviously, not where the players wanted, but Major League Baseball still raised it by $125,000. That's very significant in terms of. That might be an area where the players should compromise, because as much as we want to get those young guys money, Major League Baseball raised it a lot. They raised it by over $100,000. You can't really complain with that.
Bargaining, guys, it's happening. It's happening. No, but
not really.
No, it's not. It's not happening at all. We are so sad, but no, it's there's not a whole lot else that can be said.
Actually, you know what? I'm not that sad right now.
You're not sad.
Because I guarantee you right now, if free agency was going on, the Yankees would have me depressed right now. I guarantee it.
Well, here's another thing, is that, it's not just as easy of a fix for when this lockout ends to say, hey, everyone report to spring training tomorrow. Guys are going to have to get down there. And yes, while most guys might already be renting out their Airbnbs in Florida and Arizona, there still needs to be a free agent period for the guys who are unsigned. You still got to get those physicals checked out, maybe physicals of guys who signed on the last day or so, just to make sure everything's all right, although I think most of those guys passed the physicals. But you need that period for those free agents. You need to give guys time to just generally ramp up, even if they've been doing stuff on their own, guys to be cohesive as a team. So it's not a simple fix, it's because think about all the names that are out there. It's not like you have low level guys out there. You have Carlos Correa, you have Chris Bryant. You have all these guys who are out there looking for big money and who are going to get big money that are out there, and those are the two headliners. But that it's going to be interesting to see where this thing goes and how quickly. Correa, Bryant, all those big guys, how quickly they signed Trevor Story and another guy who probably should be going to Houston, Kyle Schwarber, Seiya Suzuki.
Yeah.
Another big one. He bid his farewell post to his Japanese teammates today, so obviously he's getting going pretty soon. But there's a lot of guys out there that are going to need to be signed and that are going to need to be compensated well, and they got to work through the language of that.
Yeah, something else to note about reporting to spring training, it's not how James said, hey, it's not as simple as just, all right, next day everyone come here. A lot of these guys aren't in the country. During the offseason, they leave the country. You can't just, enter just like that.
No, and even if everyone, ideally, if this thing gets delayed long enough, and that's not ideal, but ideally if it gets delayed long enough, you'd have everyone already in Florida, Arizona, so you can say show up here in 4 days, and then everyone can be there in that 4 day span. They can get their stuff together. I don't know what their testing protocol is in spring. You never know what they're going to come up with that, but you just make sure that everyone's on the same page and you have everything ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would think that like most players would have an idea though of a good timetable or a good range of when they could come to an agreement, especially as time gets closer.
That's the other
right?
thing. They'll probably know as they get closer, right?
Yeah.
Like the union.
They should be getting
know.
signs.
I mean, we might not know, but I gotta imagine the union's going to take care of their players.
Also, one other thing about free agency that I think is really interesting though. So the owners obviously want, or the teams obviously want certain guys, but I don't think that they're going to know how much they'll be able to give those guys, right? So while I know last week we were saying, oh, guys like Carlos Correa, Kyle Schwarber, they're going to sign instantly, right? But here's the thing: how much are they going to be allowed to give them? You know, what's the luxury tax threshold going to be? There are so many factors I think could play into this that they might not know for a while.
No, but let's be real, like. Whoever wants to sign Correa is on the phone with Scotty B right now, and it's like, all right, Scotty, we got, I know you have client X or you have client CC, and he's a shortstop, he's 27 years old, and like, hypothetically, he's going to be a free agent after his age 27 season, which actually happens to be this year. So what do you see a guy top 5 in his position in the game in all categories making? And then Scotty will be like, for client CC, coming off a great year, coming off five consecutive ALCSs, coming off a platinum glove, coming off whatever it may be. I see him getting in the $350 million range. You look at the numbers, you look at all the stuff, all the charts that I have, and just my guys have. Nobody else has access to it, just me. This is why I'm the billion-dollar agent. And so he's worth $350 million. Take it or leave it. And that's how these conversations are going.
No, but here's the thing, though.
My conversation was a joke, but that is how this stuff happens.
No,
that's
no,
how
right.
this stuff happens.
But you would think that, like, the luxury tax number is what, like $200 million? It's around that. Like,
well, that's a big bargaining chip. Is
exactly
what the luxury tax is going to be.
So what I'm saying is, if that number changes, don't you think that would impact how much Correa would make in free agency and how much other free agents would make? That's the point I'm making.
Well, no, like Correa, look, Correa's going to get his money, but it's not like if right now he's making $350 and then the luxury tax is way up, we're going to make it to $400. No, like a player's value is a player's value. But what that does is it incentivizes those smaller market teams to spend more. I think that's where it comes in. Or you allow those bigger market teams to pay a guy like that and then also give someone another big-time contract. I don't think it's going to impact necessarily the amount of money each player gets, but the amount of money each team is willing to go more all in an offseason.
I think that's a good point.
Like, look at what Texas did with Semien and Seager. Because they knew it was going up, so they signed 2 infielders for they gave him the bag, but they knew it was going up, so they were kind of like, we're playing with house money.
So, do you guys think that, like, assuming the luxury tax goes way up, do you think that would impact bigger markets or smaller markets better?
What do you mean by impact?
Like, could you see bigger markets spending more money, or could you see like smaller markets actually start spending more money?
I mean, the teams that go over and right up against it all the time are going to spend more.
It's just going to help them more.
Right, but you would think that, like, with the new CBA agreements, you would think that the small market teams are actually going to start spending, right?
They will, but it's like, think about the Dodgers. They were $75 million over the luxury tax last year. Right? Yeah. Like, with this new CBA agreement, they probably would have only been 40 over. Maybe they would have said, we'll get to 75 over and just spend more. Like, they'll do whatever they want.
And that's what I'm saying. So let's say the luxury tax right now, it's $210, and you got people like Yankees, Dodgers, Mets, whoever, spending $230 million, whatever. And there's other teams that, hey, we don't want to cross that. We're going to spend exactly $210. Yeah, now if it's $230, they'll spend $230.
And here's another thing with the luxury tax going up. You think about guys like Mookie Betts, guys like Chris Bryant, guys like Francisco Lindor. There's probably a better chance that those homegrown superstars sign extensions with their hometown team.
That's a good point.
Because they're not going to have to give them a hometown discount, and they're going to have more flexibility with what they want to do with the money. Like, think about this. If the luxury tax was $200 going into 2020, let's say it was $230. Don't you think the Red Sox and Cubs both try to sign Betts and Bryant to extensions, right?
Yeah, of course. That's
exactly.
An extra $30 million right there.
My point exactly. So that's going to help those big market teams keep their homegrown stars. Not that they should need that much help anyway, but it's going to provide more of an incentive to keep them around.
I don't think that's a problem. Do you see it raising being a problem, Robbie?
No, and now it'll help the Pirates with guys like Brian Hayes, Brian Reynolds, good young stars that are on the verge of free agency. Sign them now. You actually have money to spend.
As the biggest Pirates fan in the studio right now, do you agree with that, Robbie?
Yeah, I'm excited about that. But here's my thing, though. Do you guys actually see, could you see there being like a minimum amount of money that a team has to spend, if that makes sense?
I hope so. I hope so.
I hope so, too. And that gets back to my original point as well.
Teams don't want that, though.
If a team like the Rays is required to spend at least like let's say like, I don't know, $80 million
the Rays aren't
or
even
so.
the biggest issue though. Like the Rays just spent money on Franco, and they're a good team. So like, yes, I know that like they operate cheaply, but they don't operate cheaply in a bad way because they win. Like you look at a team like right now, like Baltimore or Pittsburgh, they have not been winners for years, and they like routinely haven't spent to try to make their teams better. I think that's where the problem lies more, because you look at like the A's with Moneyball, they didn't spend a lot, but they won. Tampa, the last few years, they're winning. So like you can say, oh, they're not spending that much, but I mean, how can you argue with the Rays? They've won 100 games 2 years in a row, and they made a World Series.
So if teams like the A's or the Orioles are required to spend at least $85 million or so, how are they going to get to $85 million? That's my thing. Wouldn't you think that they're going to sign somebody, or how would that look?
You give Adley Rutschman a 6-year, $85 million
That's
extension.
what I was going to say. Doesn't this just make teams more willing
that's
to do
good,
that,
though.
right?
You give your young, you lock them in.
It's good, yeah.
Because I think the big thing about baseball is that staying with a team and that loyalty and that homegrownness, you don't get that homegrownness in other sports. Like the NFL, you just go straight to the NFL after the draft. NBA, same thing. NHL, pretty much the same thing. In baseball, you work your way up from the minor leagues so you can follow a guy's progression throughout the minor leagues, and I think that's what makes fans more have more of an attraction and makes them a favorite player even more, because they grew up there, they went through the hard times in the minor leagues, and now it's finally paying off. So I think that's something where teams should be incentivized to pay their big name prospects. And like you think about the Pirates, I hope they pay Brian Hayes. I hope they're good enough. I would love to see Baltimore pay Adley Rutschman, Grayson Rodriguez, their number 2 pick in 20 out of Arkansas. I'm blanking on his name. Heston Kierstad. Heston Kierstad. I'd love to see them pay those guys. You think about, if the Indians could have paid Lindor, the Cleveland Guardians. If they could have paid Lindor, if they could have paid Bieber, if they could have paid, they did pay Jose Ramirez, but it's a team friendly deal. Like imagine if they had more money to play with. Lindor's probably still in Cleveland. So we'll see what happens, but
yeah, no, honestly,
it's an interesting hypothetical.
What do you think about that, Robbie? Do you think a floor would actually be established?
But they'll never agree to that.
That's what I'm saying. They won't agree to it.
No, I think it'd be exciting though, because you have, like you guys said, smaller market teams.
The Pirates.
My Pirates. The Orioles. The Kansas City Royals. I mean, it's going to create more excitement for the fans, especially once the guys come up. Now, it probably will create more anger considering the fact that they might become busts or something like that, but I think it's just a great idea. I mean, it would help them bring excitement to fans, and it shows that they actually have to spend money. I think it would just be interesting to see how it would impact their free agent signings. I'm sure there would be average baseball players making more than they should. Like, I don't know. Matt Harvey got $6 million last year from the Orioles. Yeah. If the Orioles had to spend at least $85 million, I could see them spending $13 million on Matt Harvey or something like that, which would help the players even more.
The other funny thing is, darn well, if that becomes a thing and you have to spend, say, $80 million, they will expend exactly $80 million and make it that they do not go a cent over. That'll happen too. Yeah.
And you'll see the big markets go way over whatever the number is, I believe. I mean,
it's already happening now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many teams are over the luxury tax threshold right now? 3?
Right?
What you talking about last year?
Well, if we're going by last year's luxury tax,
the Dodgers, the Padres, and
I guess it was 2, but now it would be the Mets if you count from the offseason.
Yeah.
Assuming where the offseason is right now, it's the Dodgers and Mets?
Yeah.
Still the Padres? I don't think so.
No, I don't think the Padres anymore because they cleared Frazier's salary out.
Right.
But, I mean, the Red Sox don't have that far to go to get over to go.
Well, there's so many teams that are right there. The Yankees are right there.
Saying.
The Phillies are right there, yeah.
A lot of those teams, you expect Schwarber to probably sign with Philly. You expect Suzuki to probably sign in Boston. You expect the Yankees to do something else. A lot of these teams are going to go over the new tax. And another negotiating tactic that we haven't talked about. Will they do something about Will Major League Baseball do something about draft pick compensation? Because the Player Association proposed it last week. That's a big reason why teams have to reset every 3 years, because they lose draft pick compensation when they get it docked 10 spots when they go over the tax for a 3-year period in a row. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, I think that's something that the owners probably won't want to agree to, because they're not going to, especially those lower market teams. But if there's a floor, I think that's the only way they could agree to it, because then it's you kind of have one go with the other. You have the floor going with not losing draft
okay,
picks.
I see. So you think they could kind of go together?
I mean, hopefully, but
in a perfect world.
But the teams aren't going to agree to the floor, and the owners aren't going to agree to the draft pick compensation. So it's who budgets first.
There you go. Quick reminder also, if you want to call and discuss anything about the negotiations or just anything baseball related, I mean, we're open to anything. It's
Hall of Fame last week.
Right.
Your favorite free agent signing, whatever it may be.
Anything. 202-319-5106 is the number. 202-319-5106. So, guys, why don't we'll give a rest of the negotiation talk unless someone wants to call in and talk some more. And we teased this last season on the show here that we'd be going into some of the some of our own personal baseball stories, memories, things like that. Because let's be real, there's not a whole lot to talk about, and we still want to entertain you guys. We want to entertain everyone, and we feel like we have some pretty good ones. So why don't we go ahead and do just that? And I think something we've teased on here for a long time. I think we need to start with that, and that is, of course, Robbie's worst / most memorable free agent period in the 2009 offseason, 2010 offseason. I'm sorry,
2010,
and that is, of course, the Cliff Lee story. And I'm gonna let Robbie.
Can I preface this with something else?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
So we have 10-year-old Robbie Cruz upset about something after the Yankees had just won a World Series. Let's keep that in mind.
No.
It was a year after.
This was the year that they lost to the Rangers.
Oh, I see. I thought
Okay.
it was the year after they beat the Phillies.
James, come on. It was only a year, man. Can you imagine not winning a World Series for a year?
Was this not the offseason?
2010.
No. So in 2009, they won the World Series. Then that offseason, the next year, they lose to the Rangers in the ALCS.
I forgot he got traded to Seattle for 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, I will get into that.
You want to talk about two Cliff Lee stories?
I will get.
Okay. You want me to preface the Seattle stuff?
Yes.
I remember I was at baseball camp when I was 10 years old. Everyone came up to me, he's like, Cliff Lee's going to the Yankees. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, man. They just won a World Series. And then it turns out he's going to Texas. And I was the happiest kid on the planet.
Oh, my. Hold up. No. This is.
So hold on. Why don't we set the scene before we go ahead and do this for anyone that's not aware?
Am I going to do the free agent signing or the trade first?
Well, let me just say that in
Both?
2009, at the deadline, the Phillies traded for Cliff Lee. That offseason, they acquired Roy Halladay and decided they didn't want to keep both of them, and they traded Cliff Lee to the Mariners for a hefty package of busts, which were, horrible.
Kyle Drabeck?
No, that was not Kyle.
That was Roy Halladay.
We got our top person for that, Tyson Gillies and J.C. Ramirez. Anyway, they trade him to the Mariners. He has an unbelievable, I think he was an all-star, of course, that season. Really good with the Mariners. And, hey, the Mariners were not going anywhere. They said, you know what, he's on the trade block. We're going to trade him. This is the 2010 trade deadline. And I believe this is where the story starts.
Indeed it is. So, I loved Cliff Lee growing up. He was by far my favorite pitcher of all time. And you'll know how proof of it is that I got the same exact glove that he had. I used the same exact pitching motion that he did when he pitched. I learned a curveball, a circle changeup, a cutter. I threw a two-seam fastball, all because of him. Cliff Lee was my favorite pitcher. And then when he's pitching for Seattle, he looks really good. No joke.
He was great that year.
Great that year. And I remember everybody at the deadline saying, the Yankees are talking with the Seattle Mariners about a Cliff Lee deal. It's for Jesus Montero. I was on my desktop computer when I was 10 years old. 10 years old. For 11 straight hours. 11 straight hours. I'm not joking. You ask anybody close to me. It is 100% true. I was refreshing. I was talking to my dad all day. I was emailing my grandpa. Everything. And then I read a Buster Olney article. It says the Yankees are about to get him. It's on the final yard line. I'm like, we're about to get my favorite pitcher of all time. He's about to wear pinstripes. And then that night, you know what happened? That night, I had a dream that Cliff Lee was pitching for the Yankees. I'm not even joking. And I woke up that next morning. I was so excited. And I asked my dad, I said, can we please go to New York to watch Cliff Lee pitch? And he said, son, what are you talking about? And I said, what do you mean? He said, Cliff Lee's not a Yankee yet. And I'm like, what in the world? And he was like, it was a dream. So I go back to the computer. I'm refreshing my page over and over and over and over and over again, right? Then later that day, I see this stupid report that says that the Yankees backed out of the Cliff Lee trade. I was so confused. I was so lost. I then called my grandpa. I FaceTimed my dad because my dad's deaf and he can't call. I literally spoke to a bunch of people when I was 10 years old, and I started bawling. I got on my knees and started crying. It was like the Yankees had just been eliminated from the 2010 ALCS, only they hadn't been. They just didn't acquire my favorite pitcher. So at that deadline, They did nothing. I think all they acquired was Lance Berkman, who was completely.
They did get Lance Berkman that year. Yeah. Good
So
times.
we're expecting Lance Berkman. We're expecting Cliff Lee. This exciting, because I'm also a lefty, so that's another reason why I idolize Cliff Lee. I also wore number 33 for a while because that's how much I love this brother. Okay, we don't get him. I then cry on my knees. Then the ALCS comes, and I'm like, the Yankees got to go up against the Rangers. Cliff Lee's been dominating. I've seen what he's done in the postseason. He's one of the greatest postseason pitchers of all time. And I wasn't that upset because I knew that he was a free agent that offseason, and it was down to the Yankees and the Rangers. And, Andrew, what do you always say about free agents when it comes to signing?
I say that typically, in 99% of the cases, it comes down to the money.
It comes down to the money. And I'm watching all these videos. JR Sports Brief, this random YouTuber who I follow, I would watch ESPN all day long. I'd refresh my computer because I didn't have a phone at the time because I was 10 years old. I'm refreshing my phone. I'm looking at everything all day long. And everybody's like, oh, Cliff Lee's probably going to sign with the Yankees. They're going to offer him more money than Texas Rangers can. It's going to start with the 7-year, $205 million deal. I didn't give a rat's tail about the numbers. I didn't give a rat's tail about the number of years, the amount of money he was going to get. I was like, I want this guy as a Yankee. And then people were saying, CC Sabathia has been recruiting him, his former teammate in Cleveland.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, like this is looking really. I heard somebody say Austin Kearns, the former Cleveland Indians, recruiting Cliff Lee to the Yankees. Everything looked so good. And then my dad wakes me up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he says Cliff Lee signed with the Phillies. And at first I thought he was joking. I started laughing hysterically, and I started shaking. And then next thing you know, my dad pulled out his phone, showed me the article. I go on ESPN.com, go to MLB.com, and I just lost it, folks. I started crying. I started shaking. And at that point, my dad said he's never seen me so upset over sports. Says that to this day. He's never seen me that upset. I've witnessed the Los Angeles Lakers choke. I've witnessed the New York Giants choke. I've witnessed the Yankees get eliminated from the playoffs. How many times? Like 11 times out of the last 12 years. I've witnessed all of these things, and including all that, nothing was more painful than Cliff Lee signing with the Philadelphia Phillies. That hurt me so bad, and I will never forgive him for doing that because he wanted to be in Philly. I will never forgive him, and I will never forget what happened.
Maybe the Yankees didn't offer him what he wanted.
No. They offered him more than what he wanted because what happened was he originally wanted, 8 years, $240 million, something insane.
He wanted at least 200.
Everything he wanted, the Yankees were offering him. Do you remember that?
Of course I remember
everything he wanted, the Yankees were like, we'll give you whatever you want. That's how badly we want you. And then he just turns us down to go to the Phillies for like $60 million less.
And correct me if I'm wrong, what we just heard was the origin story of why Robbie Cruz hates the Philadelphia Phillies, right?
You know, that's a pretty big reason because I will never forget them for signing Cliff Lee. I will never, ever let that go. That's how much I love this man. That's how much I idolize him. I literally dreamt of him wearing pinstripes. I got a glove that has the same exact one as he has. I use his pitching motion, his same jersey number. He was my role model. And everybody's saying, oh yeah, you're about to get him. And then he goes to the Rangers and the Phillies? Are you kidding me?
He was in Philly already. He probably just wanted to go there. Maybe the Yankees' title drought goes back to the curse of Cliff Lee.
No. This is what happened, okay? And it bothers me so much.
Wait,
okay?
you're talking about why he chose the Phillies?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of how Yankee fans treated him and his wife. Mm-hmm. That bothers me. Yankee fans, why would you do that? I understand.
Okay. You can't, dude. Of course, yeah. As an opponent, of course, Yankees fans are going to do that. You can't blame them for that. They're going to do that to anyone. They did this
spitting on his wife.
They did the same thing to Garrett Cole. They didn't do that to his wife. They did the same.
That's the thing. They didn't do it to his wife. That's why he was
okay.
mad.
But have you?
No,
seen
this is actually the reason.
Have you seen the videos before Game 3 of the LCS in 19? They were harassing Cole in the bullpen. What does he do 2 months later? He signs with the Yankees.
Okay, but no, that doesn't matter though. Like, harassing somebody in the bullpen's a lot different than spitting on somebody's wife.
Yeah, this wasn't a hypothetical, by the way. That was almost all but confirmed. That was one of the main reasons
Cliff
why
Lee
he
was
turned it down.
going to go to the Yankees. he was going to go to the Yankees, and then
Yeah.
then they started spinning on his wife, and it's like, yes, Yankee fans, I understand. You're pissed by the fact that he just spanked us. He made us look like babies up at the plate, and this is how you return the favor when we need him.
Look, as bad as that is, I'm telling you, Yankees fans, that something different happened to them since that old stadium's been torn down. I don't know what it is, but there's something different about you. And I'm not condoning spitting on people. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm just saying in terms of teams aren't scared to go into the new Yankee Stadium. Teams would turn like white as ghosts going into the old Yankee Stadium. There was mystique about that stadium. The fans would get on you in a different way that they haven't got on teams at the new Yankee Stadium. For whatever reason.
It's not the same place that Babe Ruth played at anymore. That's what it is.
If I could go back in time,
yeah,
I would rewrite everything that the Yankees have done. I'm willing to pass up on Garrett Cole. I'm willing to pass up on Rafael Soriano because those are two of the biggest free agent signings of the Yankees. I would be willing to let go of Giancarlo Stanton for the Yankees to get Cliff Lee. If the Yankees get Cliff Lee, I guarantee you they win at least one more World Series. Can you imagine that?
Did the Phillies win one with him? You can't say they would have.
No, but here's the thing. The Yankees were close so many times. And what was their – hold up. In the 2010s, what was the Yankees' biggest problem? Every single year.
Pitching.
It was starting pitching.
But Cliff Lee also wore down very fast. Like with his elbow injury, he didn't last until 19 or 18 or whatever. He retired in 2015 when he was hurt. Like his last full season was 14.
Yeah.
So
give the Yankees a guy like Cliff Lee. That's a
so really just 2011, maybe some of 13.
That's not true. He was an All-Star in 13.
He
as well.
was good.
He
Right,
was
no,
very
right.
good for those 3
the first
years.
No, yeah, right. He was an All-Star in 11 and 13. But I'm saying in terms of like where the Yankees were, they didn't make the playoffs in 13.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know what? A 1-2 punch of CC Sabathia, then Cliff Lee, and you got a number 3 pitcher of Hiroki Kuroda because Kuroda was filthy back then. That rotation would have led us to at least one World Series. I guarantee it. So they missed their window, a great opportunity to make a World Series.
I would like to offer a alternate take on this story because there was a young 10-year-old boy about 300 miles away in Philadelphia who was reading all the reports that he was going to sign with. And by the way, I'd already gotten over the fact that Cliff Lee was not a Philly. When he was traded at the end of 2009, I was very upset. I loved Cliff Lee. He was my mom's favorite player, I believe still is, and he was just such a cool guy. He was so calm. He was so collected. He was a savage. I loved Cliff Lee, but I'm reading all those reports. He's going to go to the Yankees or the Rangers, and especially the Yankees ones. I'm like, I was raised where you're supposed to hate the Yankees, right? That's the American thing to do. And I'm like, my favorite guy, like he's going to go to the Yankees. And I remember specifically reading that report and going to bed and thinking, that's it. And I woke up the next day. It was either a snow day or it was the Immaculate Conception. I don't remember why I had off. But I do remember that we turned on MLB Network, and Cliff Lee was a Philly. And just to 2 things, actually, Robbie. To make yourself feel better, number 1, Cliff Lee is the reason, by the way, I fully believe, 100%, that we did not win the World Series in 2011. Do you know why that is?
Yeah, didn't he give up the home run in
Game 2 of the NLDS? We gave him a 4-0 lead, and he blew it.
Oh,
and I will never forgive him for that.
I wish you saw my reaction when that happened.
You're probably very happy.
I'm not even joking. From 2011 to 2013, every single time Cliff Lee pitched, I would watch. That was the only time I'd ever watch the Phillies because I wanted him to struggle so badly. I wanted him to fail. He's the only guy I've ever rooted to fail. I've never rooted, besides the Red Sox, the entire Red Sox team, they can go fail all I want. Like I would love to see Rafael Devers hit 220 next year. I would love to see Xander Bogaerts.
You want him to play? You want him to play like Gleyber Torres?
I want to see him play like Miguel Andujar next year. Okay, that's what I want. But with Cliff Lee, I wanted him to fail. And seeing that game when he lost in Game 2, I loved it because everybody's like, oh, this guy's the greatest postseason starting pitcher in Philadelphia Phillies history. He's this great starting pitcher, and the Yankees will regret not getting him. I loved it.
Yeah, I don't doubt that you did. But a second thing with Cliff Lee, I don't think we really explained this, but what actually happened with that deal, in case you're not aware, he was offered, like Robbie said, almost $40 to $50 more million
So he
to be
was
with the
offered
Rangers.
7 years, $150 million by
Right.
the Yankees, and he signed with the Phillies for 5 years, $120 million.
And in case you don't,
the Yankees went up over 200. I remember.
I'm looking at the numbers right now.
it might have been a
remember-
report. It might have been a report.
Might have been a report, but I remember people were saying that the Yankees were willing to go over $200 million. They wanted this guy.
Well, the point is, though, it was a thing where the deal was pretty much decided to be done. All the insiders were saying it was one of those two teams with heavy focus on the Yankees. And it was actually Ruben Amaro Jr., the general manager of the Phillies at the time, who kind of came in at the last second and talked to Lee's agent and said, hey, we'd love to have you back. We cannot give you what the other guys want or want to give you, but we would love to have you back. We want to make something work. And apparently it was Lee and his wife and his family that really, really loved Philadelphia and said, you know what, we will take the pay cut. We want to go there. And honestly, I do always say, Robbie called me up, but I do always say it's all about the money in free agency. It normally is, but this is one of the only times I can think of where it wasn't the case. And that's a significant discount. You know, if we're talking recently, Zach Wheeler took, I think, $2 million less to go to the Phillies over the White Sox, and that was because his wife was from New Jersey. But that's $2 million. This was a $20 to $30 million pay cut. So either it was something. You see, that's the thing where everyone's like, oh, it's because I spit on his wife. And I do think that was a large contributing factor, but he was talking to the Yankees the whole time. I mean, I don't think he just decided at the last second, oh, wait, you guys spit on my wife. Like,
I don't know. Also, I mean, the big thing with Cliff Lee, though, like, you know he hates New York now. Because do you remember, what was it, 2013 when the All-Star game was held at Citi Field?
Oh, of course I remember that.
They introduced Cliff Lee, and he just stared at, like,
they announced that year it was Lee and Dominic Brown from the Phillies. It was in Citi Field, and they announced Cliff Lee's name. The entire stadium. If you haven't seen this, look it up on YouTube. Cliff Lee 2013 All-Star Game. The entire stadium erupts into boos. There was no one who was booed more than him, and he just stood there and stared at the camera with a blank expression. He was a weird guy. He was a really weird guy, and I think that was part of his charm. I mean, you remember 2009, and of course, I think I can talk about this without Robbie getting upset because he ended up winning the World Series. But Game 1, have you seen just a performance from a guy that is just so calm and chill and dominant?
Nonchalant, yeah.
The catch off to the side, the catch between his legs. He was just like, there's a great scene of him after he made that catch, and he just kind of shrugs on camera. It's like, yeah, whatever, you know. It was just easy for him, and he was a fun guy to watch.
I know, and honestly, you know, I think it would have been interesting to see how he would have done with the New York media, because I don't think he did interviews a lot, did he?
He didn't do a lot of interviews, and I also think that's a lot of the reason why he didn't choose there as well. Because if you think about the places he was, Philadelphia was the biggest media, baseball town, and even then, the guys pretty much left him alone. They didn't grill him a whole lot. I mean, Cleveland, Seattle, Texas, it wasn't really a big thing. And I don't think he was on the level of, like, Zach Greinke, when Greinke signed with the D-backs for that reason. But he was a weird antisocial guy.
See, that's weird, though, because Greinke was with the Dodgers for how many, 3 years?
Yeah, but he was traded there, wasn't he?
No, he signed with the Dodgers.
Maybe that's before it was really a big issue for him? Because I know
it's been a big issue with him.
So maybe that was just the money was too good and he couldn't turn it down? Yeah. Because I know that's been a big thing with Zach Greinke for a while. I mean...
No, the Dodgers gave him the money. So
yeah, right.
All right, so
putting a bow on the Cliff Lee story here for the last 10 minutes, right? The moral of the story, Robbie. What do we take away from Cliff Lee not signing with the Yankees in 2010?
The biggest takeaway is that I will remember this forever, and like I said, I would have rather had Cliff Lee sign with the Yankees than Garrett Cole sign with the Yankees. I would have rather had Cliff Lee sign with the Yankees than Giancarlo Stanton getting traded to the Yankees. I would have rather had Cliff Lee sign with the Yankees than Aaron Judge being drafted by the New York Yankees. I would have rather had Cliff Lee sign with the Yankees than Aroldis Chapman being... All the moves that the Yankees have made, none of them would have meant more to me than Cliff Lee coming. So that's the big thing.
Even with what you know about how the contract turned out, you still would go back and do it.
100%, just because it was my childhood. He was my role model. I loved him. I will say, though, as much as I hate Cliff Lee, I'm very sad to see the way his career ended.
Yeah.
I will, you just don't want to root for a guy to get injured. The fact that his arm basically blew out, you hate to see it.
He said, "I'm done," and walked off.
Yeah. I want to say, though, James, do you have any stories of any free agent signings that really made you depressed?
I was just about to ask, what's the most memorable, I guess, chase where you really thought that this is the Red Sox guy, or maybe even trade, I mean, that really upset you?
Actually, wait. Before you say that, how did you feel when the Red Sox traded Adrian Gonzalez, Carl Crawford, Nick Punto to the Dodgers?
Yeah, that's a good question. What was your reaction to that?
Relieved.
Fair.
Relieved. I was just really. I was. I was a little bit upset they traded Gonzalez, but I understood it had to be done, and I was just relieved that the whole chicken and beer debacle from the year before, and then the terrible year under Bobby V. I was just relieved that the Dodgers bailed him out, and they could kind of reset from there. Like,
it didn't take them long either.
No, it didn't. It didn't. But in terms of a trade or signing, I mean, I think a big one obviously was Stanton. Coming off the MVP year, the Red Sox we're still trying to replace David Ortiz, and I think that was a guy where the Red Sox were linked to him the entire time. They weren't necessarily in, but the package at the time, it's centered around a lot of different guys. You're hearing things like it was going to center around Benintendi when he was still coming off a year where he was the top prospect in baseball. It was going to center around Rafael Devers. It was going to center around both of them. Maybe it was going to center around Xander Bogaerts because there were talks about after 17 rebooting and reshooting this whole thing in Boston, and would they trade Jackie Bradley? I mean, there were a lot of things where it's like they could trade whoever they wanted for Stanton because they had the prospect capital still with Dombrowski, and they needed to do something drastic because what happened in 16 and 17 just in the playoffs was just really unacceptable, especially in 17. I mean, the whole ending with John Farrell didn't sit well in anyone's mouth. So, I think Stanton wait, like I was up all night just scrolling through Twitter and I kept hearing nothing. Then I woke up early the next morning. It was a Saturday. I remember I woke up early and I saw Giancarlo was traded to the Yankees. And I think the biggest thing that was a bummer for me was more like he was one of my favorite players in the game. And it's like, not only does he go to the hated Yankees for everyone, like he goes to my team's biggest rival. And it's like someone who I can't root for anymore and who I can't enjoy just watching mammoth home runs from and all that. Not that it's like done the Yankees any good, but like I'm in hindsight, I'm much happier that the Red Sox signed JD Martinez than trading for Giancarlo Stanton. It's like what JD has done is awesome. He's obviously become my favorite player with the Red Sox, but just seeing what Stanton could have been, especially after trying to replace Ortiz in a year where they finished last in the AL in home runs and still made the playoffs, that was probably one that I can think of. Another one that I think really comes to mind in terms of like just overall frustration from, missing out on because, I feel like the big market teams, they're in on so many guys, whether it's a trade, whether it's a free agent signing, they have the money to spend. They have the guys to go get, so that they can kind of go get whoever they want. And, obviously the Red Sox have had their fair share of big signings over the last decade. You go to Carl Crawford, who was a bust, but Adrian Gonzalez was phenomenal in the year and a half he was there. Hanley Ramirez, Pablo Sandoval, Mike Napoli. Yeah, that was one that I was excited about. For sure. But, guys that they've missed out on that could have very well helped them, I think that's always something that you always just, you're like, shoot, like you can't sign everyone, but it's more just like you want to sign everyone. And I think like my pipe dream was always trying to get Bryce Harper to go there, but after 18, it was like they were coming off the World Series 108-win team. That wasn't going to happen. So I guess the only other one would be trading Mookie Betts away. I mean,
yeah. I had to figure that was going to be on there, but
yeah, no, that was a killer, man. That was a killer. I remember I was sitting in Opus and I saw he was getting traded, and I kind of blank stared at the TV for like 4 hours the rest of the night just watching SportsCenter. I mean, like he's still my favorite player in baseball. I mean, I love the guy, but
hey, at least he was traded to a team.
At least he was traded to the Dodgers. Exactly. Like no hard feelings for Mookie.
And he got a World Series. Another one.
Well, dude, like and the thing is that like people want to give the Red Sox a hard time, and like. It's like, yeah, sure. Like I still give them a hard time for it, but it's like he won an MVP there, he won a World Series there, they won 3 division titles in a row. Like he did everything he needed to do in Boston. It's not like they failed with the best player in the game outside of Mike Trout. Like they maximized his potential. He maximized his potential. There's no hard feelings and no complaints. It's not like it's an in-your-face thing. They did everything they needed to do with Mookie.
I'd like to say your point about Stanton being traded and like, this is a guy I just can't root for anymore. Now you know how I feel watching Acuna and Soto so many times a year. I mean, some of the most exciting players in baseball, I can't root for them. I want them to fail, obviously. It's so unfortunate. So completely relate to that.
I will say, though, in recent memory, whenever the Red Sox have pursued a free agent, they've typically done pretty well in getting their guy.
The guys they want. So it just shows you that they really didn't want, really... any of those guys.
Yeah, they never wanted Bryce Harper.
Do you think there was a point?
No, I never thought they wanted Bryce
right.
Harper. It was more just a pipe dream for so long.
Do you think there was a point where they thought that they could actually retain Mookie Betts? Because I know there was a little bit of contract talk.
Yes, I do.
But I don't. I remember the offer was like laughable. Wasn't it?
Horrible.
No. It was bad, but I do think there was a certain time where the Red Sox thought they could retain Mookie Betts.
Okay.
And they just didn't. I mean, next week we can go into signings that I was most excited about.
Of course.
There is a signing and a trade that especially a trade that I was probably most excited about for the Red Sox for sure.
Yeah. We'll touch on that next week for sure. Yeah.
You all know a signing I was excited about for the Red Sox. When they acquired Jason Bay.
Oh yeah, that was a big one. I'm sure James is a big fan of that.
No, I will say though, like I said, the Red Sox have done really well. Andrew, let's hear your story about the Phillies.
You want to know one who I wish they got, who they missed out on, who I was upset about? Scherzer.
Yeah,
they were because
that's right.
No.
No.
They traded Lester in the middle of 14. After 14. There was talk of them trading Cespedes to Miami to go get Stanton and then to sign Scherzer. Mm-hmm. They obviously signed Hanley and Pablo instead, but like I wanted Scherzer to replace Lester, and they would have been right back on the map in 15. That's the one where I'm like, the Red Sox missed. The Red Sox missed on a guy that they could have easily outbid the Nationals.
Yeah,
that's the one.
All right, so you want to know what a disappointing one?
Yeah, disappointing free agent signing.
Or no, you mean one that didn't happen?
One that didn't happen.
So here's the thing. This is going to be a weird answer. Personally speaking, a lot of the guys I've wanted the Phillies to get, they've gotten. And I don't know if that's just luck, but like pretty much.
Be careful, don't jinx them.
I'm just saying, pretty much all the guys that I want, we've gotten. So I'm going to give a little bit of a weird one. This might not make a lot of sense to some people. But the most upset I remember being of the Phillies failing a deal was at the 2018 trade deadline, when they came in second place, runner-up to the Dodgers for the Manny Machado trade. Now you're probably thinking, what the heck, right? Like the Phillies in 2018, they were horrible, and by the end of the year, they were very bad. But you got to remember something: at the All-Star break, the Phillies were in first place by a lot of games, and they seriously lacked a big bat in that order. They had Rhys Hoskins, who hit a lot of home runs and walked, but other than that, that was it. They also lacked a third baseman, and I don't know if you'll remember, but that was the year that Carlos Santana, by the end of the year, was playing third base because we had absolutely nothing else.
Michael Franco wasn't playing third?
He was bad. That's what it was.
Oh, okay.
So, anyway, in case you're not aware, the whole talk, and I remember I was here in D.C. for the All-Star game. The whole talk during the All-Star game was Manny Machado. Maybe the Brewers are interested. No, it's pretty much the Dodgers and the Phillies. And
I remember the Diamondbacks too were in on him. Everybody was in on Manny Machado that year.
I don't remember that.
The
main three teams were the Dodgers.
Yeah, they were the main three teams, but they were like an outsider.
Right, but the point I'm trying to make is the Phillies were one of the big teams, and here I am. I haven't seen the playoffs since 2011, and I'm thinking this is great. This is what we need, and the deal was revealed that we would have gotten him for, and it was Adonis Medina and another guy. We wouldn't have had to give up Spencer Howard. We wouldn't have had to give up, at the time we still had Sixto Sanchez. We could have gotten him for Medina, who right now is absolute garbage, and another low-level prospect, and we didn't do it. And I know it would have been a rental, but you got to understand something. The Phillies in 2018 and still today in 2022 are at the point where they just need to make the playoffs. It doesn't matter how far they go. They just need to make the darn playoffs, and that's something I fully believe. If we would have just won out, yes, it would have been a rental. Yes, it would have probably changed the trajectory of where Bryce Harper ended up if we actually did make that trade. But I do think with Manny Machado's help, and that trade would have been not that bad, we could have won the division that year. Because that division, the Braves that year were not that good.
Yeah, no, I think they Machado probably would have done really well in Citizens Bank Part 2 for sure.
Citizens Bank, and he's everything we needed. We had bad defense. We had someone who couldn't play third base and shortstop, and we needed a power bat that also hit for a little bit of average. I mean, that was Manny Machado. He's a perfect fit. Trade didn't work out, obviously, and we didn't make
it seems like both of your guys' teams have done really well when you've wanted a guy, but I don't understand why the Yankees aren't getting the guy.
Because I'll tell you why. Because what you think the Yankees guy is never the Yankees guy. Outside of Garrett Cole, the people that, and I'm not just saying you, I'm saying Yankees fans in general, the people that the Yankees fans want the Yankees to sign realistically are never on their radar. Do you remember, and I know you never thought this, but do you remember in 2018 offseason when every Yankee fan on Twitter was screaming about Bryce Harper, and then Brian Cashman had to put out a statement that basically said, we've never once been interested in him?
Right. I mean,
that's the problem. There's so many people who think, oh, this is the Yankees guy, and the Yankees are like, no, we don't want this guy.
I can't tell if the Yankees were interested in Manny Machado, though.
They met with them. That was
They-
confirmed. But
they
outside
met,
of
but-
that, no, I'm sure the price was revealed, and they said, no, you're not worth it. That's what I'm saying. When the Yankees want their guy, I said this to you in 2019, when they want their guy, they get their guy, and Garrett Cole was their guy, and they got Garrett Cole. That's the thing.
Well, you know what Brian Cashman says this offseason when it started?
I know, about
He
things he
said-
wants to improve. I know.
Hey, he said, and I quote, "We're meeting with Correa. We're meeting with Seager. We already missed
meeting.
out on Seager."
Meeting doesn't mean signing. That's the thing. And he can say whatever he wants. Some of that's, service to the public as well. I'm just saying, when it comes to the Yankees, it's such a big fan base, and there's so many different opinions that I think it gets construed who their guy is. I think to an extent with the Red Sox and Phillies, it's easier to be like, yeah, this is a logical fit. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot of that going on. I think that's just a side effect of the Yankees being the biggest, sports franchise, baseball-wise, with a fan base in the world, not just the United States. I just think that's a product of that. So. And it looks like it is about 8 p.m. here in Washington, D.C., so that's going to wrap up this edition of
We have
Nation's
one more
Pastime
thing
in
to
the
say.
nation's capital, but we do have one more thing, courtesy of James, that he wants to say.
The final member of the Montreal Expos has finally retired. Tom Brady retired from football today. He was an 18th round pick of the Montreal Expos in 1995.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was scouted by a couple other teams as well.
Yes,
He was
and the reason why he wasn't drafted higher was because of his commitment to play college football at Michigan, or else scouts say he would have gone in about the third round.
I think I can
left-handed
confidently
hitting catcher.
say he probably chose the right
He
sport.
did choose the right sport. He made the right life and career decision.
Absolutely. And that'll wrap up this edition of Nation's Pastime in the nation's capital. Of course, thank you all so much for listening. And a reminder, follow us on Instagram at NatPastimeCap. There'll be highlights from this episode. There'll be the podcast form of this episode posted as well. So go ahead, do that at NatPastimeCap. And we will be live again next week on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on WCUA Radio. And with that said, I've been your host, Andrew Snaith, here with my wonderful co-hosts, as always, James Higgins and Robbie Cruz. Have a fantastic rest of your evening.
Peace out.